Democrats are hemorrhaging the very voters they think they're pandering to. The Financial Times writes, Democrats are going backwards faster with voters of color than any other demographic, and suggests the reason is that a less racially divided America is an America where people vote more based on their beliefs than their identity. Exactly. Far-left liberals are living in an old paradigm. Americans don't fit into neat little boxes anymore. Idris Elba, who says, as humans, we are obsessed with race, and that obsession can really hinder people's aspirations. Actress Raven Simone agrees. She told Oprah, I'm tired of being labeled. I'm not an African-American. I'm an American. The Democratic Party has a problem, and it's not some tiny little messaging glitch that can be fixed with a new slogan, a new consultant, or another awkward photo op with politicians kneeling in ceremonial fabric. They clearly Googled 5 minutes before the camera showed up. No, this is deeper. Democrats are losing voters. They spent years assuming we're permanently locked in. They thought identity politics was a cheat code. They thought if they spoke in the language of race, labels, representation, and symbolic gestures, people would just keep showing up, pulling the lever, and saying thank you. But voters are not NPCs. They notice when they're being talked at instead of listened to. They notice when the performance is louder than the policy. And they definitely notice when politicians treat them like demographic categories instead of actual human beings with bills, families, jobs, fears, ambitions, and common sense. So, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment because this conversation is exactly the kind of political reality check people keep trying to avoid. Bill Maher has been hammering this point for a while now, and whether people love him or hate him, he keeps landing on something Democrats desperately do not want to confront. The country has changed. The voters have changed. The culture has changed. But the party's identity politics machine is still operating like it's trapped in 2014, running the same emotional software, using the same buzzwords, and expecting the same results. And here's the problem. America is not fitting neatly into the little boxes anymore. People are mixed. Families are mixed. Neighborhoods are mixed. Music is mixed. Culture is mixed. Politics is getting mixed. Somebody can love Beyonce, own a pickup truck, watch UFC, support gay marriage, hate high taxes, distrust corporations, and still want clean air and affordable health care. What box does that person go in? Good luck. The old political spreadsheet is crashing. That's why this whole routine of we know how you vote, because we know what you look like, is starting to collapse. It's insulting. It assumes that race is destiny, that identity is ideology, and that people are basically walking census forms. But real life doesn't work like that. Real voters are complicated. They are not hashtags with legs. And Maher's point about outdated racial pandering is brutal because it's true. Remember those images of Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and Ken Clough? That moment was supposed to communicate solidarity, but to a lot of people it looked like political theater from the discount aisle. I do give who wins the next election. An outdated racial pandering is one reason Democrats lose elections. When Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi put on Ken Clough, I don't think it earned them one vote for their powerful emotional ties to Ghana. Here in California, we're now segregating kidnapping. Really, California doesn't just have Amber Alerts for missing children. We have Ebony Alerts for black children and Feather Alerts for Native American kids. What is that? We look for them by listening on the ground. It had the energy of a corporate HR department discovering diversity the night before a mandatory seminar. Nobody looked at that and thought, finally, my rent is going down. Nobody thought, at last, my kid's school is improving. Nobody thought, wow, this will fix healthcare. It was symbolism pretending to be substance, and voters are tired of symbolism with no receipt attached. That's the core issue. Performative politics can survive for a while when people feel stable. But when groceries are expensive, rent is insane, wages feel squeezed, cities feel unsafe, healthcare bills are crushing families, and parents are worried their kids won't have a better future. Voters become very allergic to nonsense. They start asking, okay, but what are you actually doing for me? And if the answer is another speech about representation, another carefully staged photo, another lecture about privilege, or another academic slogan, that sounds like it was cooked up in a faculty lounge, people tune out. Actually, they don't just tune out, they walk away. That's why Democrats' bleeding support among voters of color is such a political earthquake. For years, the party treated minority voters like guaranteed political property. Black voters locked in. Hispanic voters, obviously Democrats. Asian voters, probably Democrats, too. Young, diverse voters. No question that was the assumption. But assumptions are where political parties go to die. Because when voters feel taken for granted, they don't always yell about it. They don't always announce it. They quietly change. One election at a time, one issue at a time, one broken promise at a time. And then suddenly the party wakes up and says, wait, why are Hispanic men moving right? Why are some black voters open to Republicans? Why are younger voters not responding to our messaging? Why isn't identity enough anymore? Because identity was never enough. It was just easier than doing the hard work. It was easier to say we see you than to make life cheaper. It was easier to say your voice matters than to fix broken schools. It was easier to say representation matters than to make neighborhoods safer. It was easier to build a campaign around emotional validation than measurable results. Idris Elba, who says as humans we are obsessed with race, and that obsession can really hinder people's aspirations. Actress Raven-Symoné agrees. She told Oprah, I'm tired of being labeled. I'm not an African-American. I'm in music American. She applauds, she says, I don't know what country in Africa I'm from. My roots are in Louisiana. And look, representation does matter. Nobody serious is saying it doesn't. People want to see themselves included in the national story. That's normal. That's human. But representation without results becomes decoration. Multiracial identity point matters so much. America has moved in a direction that the old identity politics model can't fully process. The number of Americans identifying as multiracial has exploded. Interracial marriage is normal. Mixed families are everywhere. Kids are growing up with backgrounds that cannot be captured by one clean racial label. The culture is blending faster than the political class can categorize it. And honestly, that's beautiful. That is actual progress, not fake progress, not slogan progress. Not we changed our profile picture for a week. Progress, real progress, human progress. People building lives together across lines that once divided families, communities, and entire states. Even if you like identity politics, this kind of thing is antiquated. From 2010 to 2020, the number of people identifying as multiracial in America went up 276%. 1 in 5 newlyweds now are in an interracial marriage, and that number goes up to 100% in ads for Subaru. Applause, you couldn't do a remake of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner today, because almost 100% of Americans approve of interracial marriage, especially with rich in-laws. Laughter, and 95% of white women would leave their husband to marry Idris Elba. But here's where it gets interesting. The more America blends, the less useful racial sorting becomes as a political tool. If your whole strategy depends on dividing people into fixed identity groups, what happens when those identities become fluid, layered, and overlapping? What happens when a voter says, I'm black, Latino, Irish, Filipino, married to someone Jewish, raising biracial kids, and I mostly care about mortgage rates? That voter is not waiting around for a politician to tell them which box they belong in. And that's where Democrats keep missing the signal. They're still speaking to categories. Voters are asking to be spoken to as citizens. This is why comments from people like Raven-Symoné or Morgan Freeman resonate with so many Americans. When someone says, I'm tired of being labeled, that's not some fringe thought. A lot of people feel that. They're tired of being reduced, tired of being described before they're heard, tired of being told their skin color must determine their politics, personality, grievances, language, heroes, enemies, and voting behavior. At some point, people want to say, can I just be American? Can I just be a person? Can I be more than the label you find politically convenient? Morgan Freeman says, the way to finish off racism is, stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man, and I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man. There's even a movement now to ban racial questions on the census, and many of its leaders are people of color, like Professor Sheena Mason, who says to undo racism, we have to undo our belief in race. And that question terrifies the identity politics industry because there's an entire ecosystem built on keeping people divided into categories. Consultants, activists, academics, nonprofits, media commentators, campaign staffers, DI departments. A whole world that profits from slicing America into smaller and smaller tribes. They claim they're dismantling racism, but sometimes it feels like they're managing racism as a permanent business model. That is the contradiction people are noticing. You can't say your goal is a colorblind equal society while obsessively forcing every conversation through race. You can't say you want unity while training people to see separation first. You can't say you want to heal the country while constantly reopening the wound and yelling, "Look at it, look at it, look at it." At some point, healing requires something different. It requires shared identity, shared standards, shared responsibility, shared future. And yes, America has a brutal history on race. Nobody should pretend otherwise. Slavery happened. Jim Crow happened. Redlining happened. Discrimination happened. The effects didn't magically disappear because someone posted a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. once a year. But acknowledging history is not the same as being permanently trapped inside it. A mature country can tell the truth about its past without building its entire future around grievance. The liberal group Org formed in 1998 to urge Republicans to move on from the Clinton impeachment. Today's Democrats should move on from identity politics. It's not working. Applause. It's not working for them or for us. Democrats are hemorrhaging the very voters they think they're pandering to. The Financial Times writes, Democrats are going backwards faster with voters of color than any other demographic, and suggests the reason is that a less racially divided America is an America where people vote more based on their beliefs than their identity. That's the balance Democrats keep failing to strike. They often sound like they believe America is not a nation to be improved, but a crime scene to be condemned. And that's political poison because most normal Americans, including many immigrants and minorities, do not hate this country. They may criticize it. They may want reform. They may be angry about specific injustices, but they still believe America is worth loving. That distinction matters. You can love your country and demand better from it. In fact, that's usually why people demand better. They believe the country is capable of living up to its ideals. But when political activists constantly talk like America is uniquely evil, uniquely oppressive, uniquely rotten, and uniquely embarrassing, they lose people who have a much more grounded view. If the thought leaders in the Democratic Party keep encouraging and not rebuking the idea that America is cringe and the people who run Gaza are great, the Democrats are doomed. Alyssa Slotkin's right. Liberals are weak and woke, especially the white ones, and they indulge all sorts of nonsense from their kids, a pattern that then continues on in the Democratic Party. Last election, it was all the gender stuff, the insistence that men can have babies and such. And now, I fear that we like the terrorists is the new that. Most voters understand America is imperfect. They also understand it is not the worst place on earth. And when they hear privileged, college activists chant like they're auditioning for a revolution they would not survive for 5 minutes. They roll their eyes when they see people throw another nation's flag over the American flag and cheer. They don't think, wow, how brave. They think, do these people even understand what they're doing? That's another huge problem for Democrats. They've allowed the loudest, most theatrical corners of the left to define the party's emotional posture. And that posture often looks like embarrassment. Embarrassment about America. Embarrassment about patriotism. Embarrassment about tradition. Embarrassment about ordinary people who still stand for the anthem, fly the flag, go to church, support the military, and believe this country is a force for good despite its flaws. Then Democrats act shocked when those voters don't feel welcome. You cannot mock people's patriotism and then ask for their vote. You cannot sneer at the country and then ask to lead it. You cannot spend years telling people their values are backward. Their concerns are bigoted. Their language is problematic. Their culture is cringe. And then turn around during election season like, hey bestie, can we count on you? No people remember. Seriously, this is a serious problem for Democrats. Less than 1 in 4 Democrats under 30 say they're proud to be an American. 54% say they're embarrassed by it. Embarrassed. Like, America is your mom picking you up at school. You're embarrassed to be an American. Well, guess what? The feeling's mutual because you have no perspective. Is America perfect? No, of course not. No country is. Although, don't get Tucker Carlson started on Russia. And this is where the woke label became such a devastating political weapon. Originally, it meant being alert to injustice. Fine. Most decent people want injustice addressed. But then the word got attached to a style of politics that felt scolding, joyless, elitist, and completely disconnected from normal life. It became the politics of correcting people instead of convincing them. And that is how you lose, because persuasion requires respect. You have to meet people where they are. You have to understand their priorities. You have to speak like a human being. You have to make an argument that touches real life. But too often, Democrats sound like they're trying to win a seminar, not an election. And while they're doing that, voters are thinking about gas prices, grocery bills, interest rates, crime, the borders, schools, healthcare, jobs, and whether their kids can afford a home someday. That's the stuff that moves people. Not another slogan, not another symbolic alert system divided by race, not another lecture about terminology. People want competence. They want sanity. They want leaders who can walk and chew gum at the same time. Globalize the inaffatata is the catchphrase that's really catching on these days. As if worldwide suicide bombing and cosplaying Islamic revolutionaries is the answer to our problems. At an AOC Bernie Sanders rally in Idaho last month, someone threw a Palestinian flag over an American flag, and the crowd erupted in approval. What should have happened after that is one of the adults on stage should have told their young loyal followers, this is not a symbol of freedom. This is, and to be fair, Republicans have their own problems. Plenty of them. Nobody is saying the other side is some flawless machine of wisdom and virtue. Politics in general has become a circus, where half the clowns have podcasts, and the other half are fundraising off your anxiety. But the question here is why Democrats specifically keep losing ground with people they thought were safely on their side. The answer is not complicated. They stopped listening and started assuming. They assumed minority voters cared most about racial symbolism. Many care more about wages, safety, faith, family, education, and opportunity. They assumed young voters would always reward radical cultural politics. Many are exhausted by constant outrage. They assumed immigrants would automatically support open-ended progressive rhetoric. Many immigrants came to America because they believe in work, order, patriotism, and upward mobility. They assumed working-class voters would overlook cultural contempt as long as the party talked about economic programs. Many voters won't support a party that seems to look down on them. They assumed calling everything racist would end debate. Instead, people started doubting the accusation. That's what happens when a word gets overused. It loses power. When every disagreement becomes racism, when every policy debate becomes racism, when every awkward comment becomes racism, eventually people stop listening. Even when racism is real, that is dangerous. Exactly. Far-left liberals are living in an old paradigm. Americans don't fit into neat little boxes anymore. Who has the #1 country song right now? Beyoncé. Applause. Lil Nas X won a country music award and he's black and gay. Applause. And a brand ambassador for the waspiest purse in America, Coach. The biggest new star in country is Jelly Roll, who was a drug dealer, then a prisoner, then a rapper, and then a face, tattered country music star. Not to mention a giant middle finger to the idea of staying in your own lane. No. In America now, you're allowed to be many things all at once, and that's a good thing. Even when it's really stupid, because real racism should be taken seriously. But you don't protect serious accusations by cheapening them. You protect them by using them carefully and honestly. The left needs to relearn that. And Democrats also need to understand that unity is not a dirty word. For some reason, parts of the left started treating unity like it was suspicious. Like, wanting Americans to focus on shared values was just code for ignoring injustice. But unity does not mean pretending differences don't exist. It means refusing to let differences become a permanent prison. America works best when people believe they have something in common. A shared country, a shared constitution, a shared civic identity, a shared stake in the future. Without that, politics becomes tribal warfare with better lighting. And nobody can live peacefully in a country where every group is told to fear and resent every other group. That road leads nowhere good. It creates bitterness. It creates paranoia. It teaches people to interpret every interaction through suspicion. And it makes compromise almost impossible, because compromise with a political opponent becomes betrayal of your identity. That is not healthy. That is not progress. That is a slow-motion national nervous breakdown. The better vision is simple. Stop reducing people to race. Stop pandering with cheap gestures. Stop treating patriotism like a disease. And start offering practical solutions that improve daily life. Make housing affordable. Make schools functional. Make healthcare less insane. Make communities safer. Make work pay. Make government competent. Protect individual rights. Speak to Americans as Americans. That's not complicated. It's just harder than putting on a costume, kneeling for a camera, and hoping nobody asks what happened after the photo op ended. And maybe that's why Maher's critique lands so hard. It cuts through the fog. It says what a lot of voters are thinking. But many politicians are too afraid to admit. The old playbook is dead. The country has outgrown it. Voters are more complex than the categories. Culture is more fluid than the slogans. And people want leaders who understand the world as it actually is, not as it looked during the last viral campus protest. The Democrats can still adapt. That's the important part. This isn't destiny. Parties evolve, or they collapse. They can move away from identity obsession and toward a broader, stronger, more confident message. They can talk about equal opportunity without racial pandering. They can address injustice without dividing everyone into permanent tribes. They can criticize America's failures while still sounding like they love the country. They can be progressive without being performative. But they have to choose because voters are already choosing. And the message is getting louder every election cycle. Stop treating us like boxes. Stop campaigning like our identity matters more than our reality. Stop assuming you own our vote because you memorize the right phrases. Stop confusing symbolism with service. America is changing. It's becoming more blended, more independent, more skeptical, and harder to manipulate with old political tricks. That should be exciting. That should be a chance to build something better. But for a party addicted to identity politics, it feels like a threat. And that right there tells you everything, because if unity scares your political strategy, maybe your political strategy was never really about unity in the first place. So the choice is simple. Democrats can keep clinging to the old tribal script, keep pandering, keep scolding, keep acting like Americans are nothing more than racial categories, waiting to be activated. Or they can grow up, meet the country where it is, and start speaking to the real concerns of real people living real lives. The clock is ticking, the voters are moving, and the old tricks are not working anymore. Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this one is guaranteed to make people argue. Do you think Democrats can move past identity politics? Or are they too invested in the machine they built? And if you made it this far, hit like, subscribe, and stick around because the political class hates nothing more than voters who are finally paying attention.